The exasperated words sliced through the pristine silence of the Bowman Estate's garage. "If you're so smart, then fix my car." There, amidst the opulent surroundings, a $50 million hybrid supercar sat broken and humiliated, having stumped 30 of America's foremost automotive engineers. Diana Bowmont, a woman whose fury was legendary, now wrestled with a new, unwelcome guest: desperation. Her revolutionary prototype, the cornerstone of her clean energy empire, had failed every single test, threatening to bankrupt her entirely. What this tech titan didn't know, however, was that in the dying cold town of Forest Glen below, a widowed mechanic named Kenneth Garrett was meticulously teaching his brilliant 12-year-old daughter Mia the very principles of mechanical harmony, using nothing more than toy cars and refrigerator magnets. Unbeknownst to them, they were unknowingly unraveling the precise problem that had defeated MIT PhDs and corporate consultants worth millions. Sometimes true genius blossoms in the most unexpected of places. Kenneth Garrett's weathered hands tightened around his coffee mug, his gaze fixed on his daughter. Mia, with an almost ritualistic precision, was arranging an array of toy cars across their small kitchen table. The ceramic cup he held bore the faded logo of Garrett Automotive Solutions, a company that had dissolved 3 years prior, taking with it not only his wife, Sarah, but also their comfortable middle-class life. Now their cramped apartment, perched above Reed's electronics store, served as their sanctuary, a home, a workshop, and a classroom. Kenneth, a man who once designed intricate hybrid systems for major manufacturers, now eked out a living fixing whatever vehicles found their way to Ellis Auto Repair. "See, Dad? When the cars move at different frequencies, they create interference patterns," Mia explained, her young voice carrying an analytical precision that painfully mirrored Sarah's brilliant mind. At just 12, Mia possessed an intuitive grasp of mechanical systems that had even impressed her advanced physics teacher at Forest Glen Community College, where she attended special classes for gifted students. The miniature demonstration spread across their table was a complex arrangement of small vehicles interconnected by rubber bands and tiny magnets. Each component served as a representation of a different aspect of automotive systems. Ken watched, marveling at his daughter's uncanny ability to visualize abstract engineering concepts through such simple, everyday materials, a talent that seemed to transcend the need for any formal education. "What happens when they're synchronized?" Ken asked, settling into the chair opposite her. These evening sessions had become sacred moments since Sarah's passing, precious interludes where the crushing weight of overdue bills and an uncertain future couldn't intrude upon the pure, unadulterated joy of discovery shared between father and daughter. "Everything works together instead of fighting," Mia replied, her delicate fingers adjusting one of the toy cars until its movement perfectly harmonized with the others. "Like an orchestra where everyone's playing the same song instead of different melodies. The energy flows smooth and efficient instead of getting wasted in conflicts." Ken nodded slowly, the words echoing conversations he'd once shared with Sarah about the fundamental principles of hybrid vehicle design. His late wife, Sarah, had been a visionary engineer, one who firmly believed that the most elegant solutions emerged from understanding natural harmonies rather than imposing artificial controls. Her notebooks, which still sat on their bookshelf like technical scripture, contained insights about energy flow and system integration that were years ahead of their time. "Your mother would have loved seeing this," Ken said softly, reaching across to adjust a magnet that had shifted out of alignment. She always said that the best engineering solutions were conversations between different systems rather than competitions. "I know," Mia replied with the matter-of-fact sadness that had become an undeniable part of their daily lives. "That's why I want to study automotive engineering in college. I want to understand everything she discovered about making machines work in harmony with each other and with the environment." Ken's chest tightened as he thought about college tuition, advanced degrees, and the kind of opportunities that required financial resources far beyond their current means. Sarah's medical bills had consumed their savings, their house, and finally their credit, leaving them with just enough to survive, but nowhere near enough to truly thrive. The acceptance letter from MIT's early admission program sat in Mia's room like a beautiful impossibility, acknowledging her extraordinary potential while starkly highlighting their economic reality. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart," Ken said, the familiar lie coming easily despite the stack of past-due notices hidden in his desk drawer. "You're smart enough to earn scholarships, and by the time you're ready for college, things will be different." Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the harsh ring of Ken's cell phone, displaying Ruth Ellis's number. At 65, Ruth owned Ellis Auto Repair, her wisdom honed by 4 decades of keeping the garage running through countless economic uncertainties. She'd given Ken work when no one else would hire an engineer whose last employer had folded during a corporate scandal, a scandal that had nothing to do with his technical abilities, but everything to do with his unwavering willingness to question unethical practices. "Ken, I need you to come in early tomorrow." Ruth's voice carried the distinct strain of someone delivering bad news to good people. "We got a situation that requires your particular expertise, but it's not the kind of job we usually handle." "What kind of situation?" Ken asked, noting the careful way Ruth chose her words. In their 3 years of working together, she'd learned to respect his engineering background while fully understanding the financial pressures that kept him willing to tackle any mechanical challenge. "The kind that pays well if you can solve it, but might cause problems if you can't," Ruth replied cryptically. "Diana Bowmont's people called. They want to meet with you tomorrow about their car problem." Ken felt his stomach plummet at the mere mention of the Bowmont name. Everyone in Forest. Glenn knew about Diana Bowmont, the tech entrepreneur, whose family had bought half the county during their transition from coal mining to clean energy development. Her company's hybrid vehicle project had been making headlines for months, usually in connection with spectacular failures and frustrated engineers. "What kind of car problem?" Ken asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The kind that's made 30 different engineers look like idiots," Ruth said bluntly. "She's offering serious money to anyone who can fix what her experts can't." Ruth paused, her voice softening. "Ken, I know you've got principles about working for people like the Bowmonts, but this could be the opportunity we've all been waiting for." Ken looked at Mia, who had stopped playing with her toy cars to listen to the conversation, her attention as focused as if it were a complex physics problem. Her eyes held the same mixture of hope and caution that Ken felt in his own chest. "How serious is serious money?" Ken asked, though he dreaded the answer. Opportunities that seemed too good to be true usually were, especially when they involved people whose wealth came from exploiting the very communities they claimed to be helping. $100,000. "For whoever can fix the car," Ruth said, her voice carrying the weighty significance of a number that represented more than Ken earned in 2 years. "But there's a catch." You get one chance. If you think you can fix it and fail, you're done. No second attempts. No partial credit. Ken felt his pulse quicken as he calculated what $100,000 could mean for their family. Mia's college education, their overdue rent, the medical bills that continued arriving months after Sarah's death, a chance at financial stability for the first time since their world had collapsed. But he also understood the inherent risks involved in dealing with people who viewed failure as incompetence rather than a learning opportunity. "I'll think about it," Ken said finally, knowing deep down that he'd already made his decision. Mia's future depended on opportunities like this, regardless of the personal cost or professional risks involved. After ending the call, Ken found Mia watching him with the kind of serious expression that made her look older than her 12 years. She'd inherited Sarah's ability to read his emotions, understanding things that he tried to keep hidden behind a facade of paternal optimism. "Are you going to try to fix their car?" she asked, her voice carrying both excitement and concern. "Maybe," Ken replied, unwilling to commit to something that could end in public failure. "What do you think I should do?" Mia considered the question with the careful deliberation that had impressed her teachers and worried her father in equal measure. At 12, she already approached problems with the systematic thinking that most people never developed, seeing connections and patterns that escaped more experienced minds. "I think you should look at the car first," she said finally. "Not to fix it, but to understand what the other engineers missed. If it's really a harmony problem like my toy cars, then maybe you can see solutions that they couldn't, because they were focused on individual components instead of system relationships." Ken smiled at his daughter's wisdom, remembering similar advice from Sarah about approaching complex problems with curiosity rather than assumptions. The hybrid vehicle that had frustrated 30 engineers might just yield its secrets to someone willing to listen to what the systems were trying to tell each other. "That's good thinking, kiddo," Ken said, reaching across to ruffle her hair. "Want to come with me tomorrow? You might notice things that I miss." "Really?" Mia's face lit up with the kind of excitement that made all of Ken's worries seem manageable. "You'd let me help with a real engineering problem." "I'd be honored to have your help," Ken replied, meaning every single word. Mia's insights had often illuminated aspects of mechanical problems that his formal training had overlooked, bringing a fresh perspective to challenges that seemed impossible from conventional approaches. As they cleaned up the toy car demonstration and prepared for bed, Ken felt a mixture of anticipation and dread about the following day. Diana Bowmont's challenge represented either the opportunity that could change their lives forever or the failure that could utterly destroy his remaining professional credibility. But looking at Mia's eager face as she meticulously organized her notebook in preparation for their automotive adventure, Ken realized that some risks were simply worth taking, regardless of the potential consequences. Outside their window, Forest Glen settled into its nightly quiet. The abandoned coal mine on the horizon stood like a silent monument to industries that had once promised prosperity, but delivered only environmental damage and economic uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring them face to face with the kind of wealth and power that had shaped their community's destiny. But tonight belonged to a father and daughter, united by curiosity, determination, and the shared belief that understanding was infinitely more powerful than money. The hybrid vehicle waiting at the Bowman Estate might hold secrets that had eluded brilliant minds and expensive consultations. Yet Ken suspected that the real test wouldn't be technical knowledge or engineering credentials. It would be the willingness to see patterns where others saw only problems, to find harmony where others found only conflict, and to trust that sometimes the most profound solutions emerged from the simplest, most intuitive insights. In just a few hours, they would discover whether practical wisdom could triumph over institutional expertise, whether a widowed mechanic and his remarkable daughter could succeed where teams of specialists had failed, and whether the principles of mechanical harmony that Sarah had believed in so deeply could finally prove their worth in the real world. The challenge was waiting, and Kenneth Garrett was ready to accept it. Dawn arrived, gray and cold, over Forest Glen, with October mist clinging to the mountains like smoke from the town's industrial past. Ken stood in the Ellis Auto Repair parking lot, watching an expensive black sedan navigate the pothole-riddled street with obvious disdain for its surroundings. The vehicle's pristine paint job and gleaming chrome seemed almost insulting against the backdrop of boarded storefronts and rust-stained buildings that told the stark story of West Virginia's economic decline. "That's them," Ruth Ellis announced, emerging from the garage office with the careful neutrality she reserved for customers whose money came with complications. At 65, Ruth had survived 4 decades in the automotive business by understanding that every opportunity carried hidden costs, especially when dealing with people who viewed working-class communities as either resources to exploit or problems to solve. The sedan's rear door opened to reveal a woman who moved with the calculated precision of someone accustomed to controlling every variable in her environment. Diana Bowmont wore designer jeans and a tailored jacket that probably cost more than Ken earned in a month, but her green eyes held the focused intensity of an engineer confronting an impossible equation. Behind her emerged a younger man in an expensive suit, whose nervous energy suggested he was far more comfortable with boardrooms than automotive shops. "Miss Ellis, thank you for arranging this meeting," Diana said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made subordinates straighten their shoulders. "I'm Diana Bowmont, and this is Jonathan Pike, my head of security. We're here to discuss the consultation opportunity I mentioned yesterday." "Consultation," Ruth repeated with a slight smile, indicating she was testing the euphemism. "That's one way to describe it. Mr. Garrett, this is Diana Bowmont. Diana, meet Kenneth Garrett, the best diagnostic engineer in 3 counties. Ken stepped forward, wiping his hands on a shop rag before extending one to Diana. Her handshake was firm and brief, carrying the kind of assessment that reduced people to their potential utility. Jonathan Pike nodded politely, but remained several steps back, his posture suggesting he viewed the entire garage as a potential contamination risk. "Mr. Garrett, I'll be direct because I don't have time for diplomatic approaches," Diana began, her gaze sweeping across the garage's modest equipment and organized chaos. "I have a vehicle that's cost my company $50 million in development and has defeated every engineering consultant on the East Coast. Either you can fix what they couldn't, or you're wasting both our time." "What kind of vehicle?" Ken asked, though Mia had already moved closer to listen, with the focused attention she brought to complex problems. His daughter wore her weekend clothes and carried her ever-present notebook, prepared to document whatever automotive mystery they were about to encounter. "A hybrid supercar that incorporates breakthrough technology in energy recovery, regenerative braking, and adaptive suspension systems," Diana replied, her tone shifting to a technical precision that suggested genuine expertise rather than corporate jargon. Individually, each system performs flawlessly. Combined, they create a vehicle that handles like a drunk elephant on ice skates. Ken felt a familiar flutter of recognition, remembering Sarah's theories about system interference and the challenges of integrating advanced technologies without creating harmonic conflicts. The problem Diana described sounded exactly like the kind of engineering puzzle that had fascinated his late wife, the type of challenge that required understanding relationships rather than just components. "Have your consultants identified the specific failure modes?" Ken asked, his diagnostic instincts engaging despite his reservations about working for someone whose wealth had been built on Forest Glen's economic collapse. 30 different failure analyses, each more expensive and less useful than the last, Diana said, her frustration finally breaking through her professional composure. The regenerative braking system fights the adaptive suspension. The energy recovery conflicts with the stability control. The AI optimization creates feedback loops that make everything worse instead of better. Mia looked up from her notebook, where she'd been sketching quick diagrams of the systems Diana described. "It sounds like they're all trying to optimize different parameters simultaneously," she said, her young voice cutting through the adult conversation with characteristic directness. "Like having multiple conductors trying to lead the same orchestra." Diana's attention shifted to Mia with the kind of surprised interest that adults reserve for children who speak above their supposed intellectual station. "That's actually a remarkably apt analogy," she said, kneeling to Mia's eye level with unexpected respect. "What's your name?" "Mia Garrett," she replied, with the quiet confidence that had impressed her teachers and worried her father in equal measure. "I'm studying mechanical systems and harmonic resonance. Dad's been teaching me about how different components can either work together or interfere with each other." "Harmonic resonance," Diana repeated, her expression shifting as the implications registered. "None of my consultants mentioned harmonic analysis in their failure reports. They focused on individual system optimization rather than interactive dynamics." Ken felt a surge of protective pride as he watched his daughter articulate concepts that million-dollar consulting teams had apparently missed. Mia's informal education in mechanical principles had given her insights that formal engineering training sometimes obscured: the ability to see forests instead of just trees. "Would you be willing to examine the vehicle?" Diana asked, her question directed at both Ken and Mia. "I have it stored at my estate, along with complete diagnostic equipment and all the previous engineering reports. If you can identify what 30 experts missed, the consultation fee is $100,000. "And if we can't?" Ken asked, understanding that wealthy people rarely offered money without corresponding penalties for failure. "Then you join the list of people who thought they were smarter than they actually were," Diana replied bluntly. "But you'll have learned something about the difference between confidence and competence." The challenge carried obvious risks beyond simple professional embarrassment. Diana Bowmont represented the kind of institutional power that could make life difficult for anyone who disappointed her expectations. But looking at Mia's eager expression, and remembering Sarah's belief that understanding trumped credentials, Ken realized that some opportunities were worth the potential consequences. "We'll take a look," Ken said, his decision carrying the weight of financial desperation and parental hope in equal measure. "But I want to examine the vehicle and review the previous reports before committing to any repair attempts. Fair enough, Diana agreed. My estate is 15 minutes from here. We can go now, if you're available. 20 minutes later, Ken found himself following Diana's sedan up a winding mountain road that led away from Forest Glen's industrial decay toward the kind of wealth that seemed to exist in a different universe. The Bowmont Estate kan state e Ocubazel Ocubabai. Hapapidba Sensaid, several hundred acres of pristine mountain landscape, its gates and security systems suggesting the kind of privacy that money could buy but neighbors couldn't afford. The main house was a study in understated elegance, all natural stone and large windows that captured spectacular views of the West Virginia mountains. But Ken's attention was immediately drawn to the separate garage facility, a building that looked more like a high-tech laboratory than a traditional automotive workshop. This is where we've been conducting the testing, Diana explained as she led them toward the garage. Complete diagnostic equipment, environmental controls, and enough space to run full performance evaluations. The garage doors opened to reveal a vehicle that took Ken's breath away. The hybrid supercar was a masterpiece of automotive design. Its sleek lines and advanced materials represented the kind of engineering excellence that Ken had once hoped to contribute to during his corporate career. But even at rest, the car seemed to radiate the mechanical tension that Diana had described, as if its various systems were locked in perpetual conflict. Beautiful, Mia breathed, approaching the vehicle with the reverent attention she usually reserved for particularly elegant physics demonstrations. But you can see the design conflicts just by looking at the component placement. Ken followed his daughter's gaze, noting the subtle signs of engineering compromise that suggested each system had been optimized independently rather than integrated holistically. The regenerative braking components seemed to fight for space with the adaptive suspension elements. The energy recovery systems appeared to interfere with the stability control networks. "May I look under the hood?" Ken asked, his diagnostic instincts fully engaged despite his awareness of the social and economic chasm between his world and Diana's. "Please," Diana replied, producing a tablet that displayed real-time data from the vehicle's multiple sensor networks. "Everything you see is yours to examine. I just want the damn thing to work the way it was designed to work." As Ken began his examination of the hybrid supercar's complex systems, he felt Sarah's presence almost as strongly as if she were standing beside him, guiding his understanding toward solutions that honored the natural harmony between different mechanical functions. The vehicle represented the kind of engineering challenge that his late wife had dreamed of tackling, the opportunity to prove that cooperation could triumph over competition in the realm of advanced automotive technology. But success would require more than technical expertise. It would demand the courage to challenge assumptions that had guided 30 previous consultants, the wisdom to see patterns that formal training had overlooked, and the trust to believe that sometimes the most profound solutions emerged from the simplest insights. The real test was about to begin, and Kenneth Garrett had never felt more ready to prove that practical understanding could triumph over institutional arrogance. The hybrid supercar's engine compartment revealed a maze of cutting-edge technology that represented millions of dollars in research and development. Ken's trained eye immediately recognized components from different manufacturers, each system representing the pinnacle of automotive engineering in its specific domain. Yet something fundamental was wrong with how they had been integrated. A discord that vibrated through the entire vehicle, even while stationary. "The primary hybrid controller is a masterpiece," Ken murmured, tracing electrical connections with the careful reverence of someone who understood both the complexity and elegance of advanced automotive systems. The unit bore the distinctive markings of German precision engineering, its aluminum housing containing processors capable of managing thousands of variables per second. Mia crouched beside the front wheel assembly, her notebook already filling with detailed sketches of the regenerative braking system. "Dad, look at how the brake energy recovery connects to the suspension control. They're using the same sensor inputs, but processing them for completely different purposes." Diana moved closer, her interest clearly piqued by Mia's observation. "Explain what you mean." "Well," Mia began, her young voice taking on the teaching tone she'd inherited from both parents. "The regenerative braking wants to capture as much energy as possible when the car slows down, so it tries to maximize the braking force at each wheel, but the adaptive suspension wants to minimize jolting and keep the ride smooth. So, it tries to distribute braking forces evenly to prevent sudden weight shifts." Ken felt a familiar surge of pride as his daughter articulated concepts that had apparently escaped 30 professional consultants. Her informal education in mechanical principles had given her a perspective unclouded by conventional assumptions about how systems should interact. "They're fighting each other," Diana said slowly, the implications becoming clear. "The regenerative system optimizes for energy recovery, while the suspension system optimizes for comfort and stability. When both systems try to control the same components simultaneously—" "Chaos," Ken finished, remembering Sarah's warnings about the dangers of competing optimization algorithms. "Each system thinks it's improving performance, but they're actually creating interference patterns that make everything worse." Jonathan Pike had been monitoring their conversation from a respectful distance, but now he approached with a tablet displaying what appeared to be financial projections. "Miss Bowmont, the board meeting is in 2 hours. They're expecting either a solution or a recommendation to abandon the project entirely." Diana's expression tightened with the kind of stress that came from betting a company's future on technological innovation. "The automotive industry is watching this project, Jonathan. If we succeed, we revolutionize hybrid vehicle design. If we fail publicly, every competitor will use our mistakes to discredit the entire concept of advanced energy recovery systems." Ken understood the broader implications of what they were attempting. The hybrid supercar wasn't just an expensive toy for wealthy enthusiasts. It was a proof of concept that could influence the development of sustainable transportation for millions of people, determining whether future vehicles would be designed around cooperation between systems or continued conflict. "How much time do we have?" Ken asked, his engineer's mind already working through potential solutions to the harmonic interference problems Mia had identified. "The board wants a definitive answer by 5 p.m. today," Diana replied. "Either the car works or I recommend scrapping $50 million in development costs and accepting that our approach was fundamentally flawed." 6 hours to solve a problem that had defeated 30 experts working for months. Ken felt the familiar combination of excitement and terror that accompanied truly challenging engineering puzzles, the kind of problems that separated competent technicians from innovative problem solvers. "We'll need complete access to the diagnostic systems and all the previous engineering reports," Ken said, his decision made despite the obvious risks. "And I want to drive the car myself to understand how the conflicts manifest under actual operating conditions." "Absolutely not," Jonathan Pike interjected, his security training clearly outweighing any respect for Ken's expertise. This vehicle represents proprietary technology worth millions of dollars. We can't allow unauthorized personnel to operate systems they don't fully understand. Then you'll never understand why 30 authorized personnel failed to solve the problem, Mia said, with a kind of direct logic that made adults uncomfortable. Dad needs to feel what the car's doing wrong before he can figure out how to make it do things right. Diana studied Mia's earnest expression for a long moment, then turned to Jonathan with obvious irritation. Mr. Pike, I'm paying Mr. Garrett to solve a problem that our authorized personnel couldn't handle. Either we trust his judgment or we admit that our approach to this project has been fundamentally misguided from the beginning. The tension between Diana's desperation and Jonathan's caution filled the garage with an uncomfortable energy that reminded Ken of corporate environments where protecting procedures often mattered more than achieving results. He'd seen similar dynamics destroy promising projects during his years in automotive development, bureaucratic caution strangling innovation in the name of risk management. I'll take full responsibility for any damage, Ken said quietly. But I need to understand how the systems behave under real driving conditions. Static analysis can only reveal so much about dynamic interactions. Fine, Diana decided, overruling Jonathan's obvious objections. But I'm coming with you. If this car is going to destroy my company's reputation, I want to witness the failure personally. The hybrid supercar's interior was a study in technological sophistication, with digital displays showing real-time data from dozens of sensors monitoring everything from battery charge levels to individual wheel speed variations. Ken settled into the driver's seat, his hands finding the controls with the automatic familiarity of someone who'd spent decades understanding how human intentions translated into mechanical responses. The first thing you'll notice, Diana said from the passenger seat, is that the car feels uncertain about its own capabilities, like it's constantly questioning whether it should be sporty or efficient, comfortable or responsive. Ken activated the hybrid system, immediately feeling the subtle vibrations that indicated competing control algorithms trying to optimize different parameters simultaneously. The regenerative braking system wanted to capture every possible joule of energy, while the adaptive suspension sought to isolate passengers from any driving dynamics that might compromise comfort. It's like having two experienced drivers trying to control the same vehicle, Ken observed as they began moving through the estate's private roads. The supercar's acceleration was impressive, but somehow unsatisfying, its advanced systems working against each other instead of in harmony. Mia had positioned herself behind the center console where she could observe both the digital displays and the adults' reactions to the vehicle's behavior. Her notebook filled with observations about how the car's various systems created conflict rather than cooperation. Feel that hesitation when you brake? Ken asked Diana as they approached a turn. The regenerative system is trying to maximize energy recovery, but the stability control is fighting to maintain traction. They're both right about their individual objectives, but they're creating a combined response that achieves neither goal effectively. Exactly, Diana confirmed, her frustration evident in every word. Every consultant we've hired has focused on optimizing individual systems without considering how those optimizations might conflict with each other. They've made each component perform better in isolation while making the overall vehicle perform worse as an integrated system. Ken guided the hybrid supercar through several more test scenarios, each one confirming his growing understanding of the fundamental design flaw that had eluded 30 previous consultants. The problem wasn't mechanical failure or software bugs. It was a philosophical conflict between different approaches to optimization that had been embedded in the vehicle's basic architecture. "I think I understand what's happening," Ken said as they returned to the garage facility. "But the solution isn't going to involve upgrading components or fine-tuning individual systems. It's going to require a completely different approach to how these systems communicate with each other." "What kind of approach?" Diana asked, her tone carrying both hope and skepticism in equal measure. Ken looked at Mia, whose notebook contained sketches and observations that had already proved more insightful than millions of dollars in professional consulting. His daughter's understanding of mechanical harmony might just hold the key to solving a problem that had stumped some of the most credentialed engineers in the automotive industry. The kind of approach that treats the vehicle as a single organism instead of a collection of competing components, Ken replied. But implementing that approach is going to require trusting insights that don't come from conventional engineering training. As they prepared to dive deeper into the technical challenges ahead, Ken realized that their success would depend not just on mechanical expertise, but on the courage to challenge fundamental assumptions about how complex systems should be designed and integrated. The next few hours would determine whether practical wisdom could triumph over institutional thinking, and whether a widowed mechanic and his remarkable daughter could succeed where teams of specialists had failed. The real work was about to begin. Back in the garage facility, Ken spread the previous engineering reports across a workbench that had probably cost more than his annual salary. Each document represented weeks of analysis by highly credentialed consultants, their conclusions forming a mountain of expensive failure that had consumed months and millions of dollars. The reports shared a common theme: individual system excellence undermined by inexplicable integration problems. Dr. Peterson from Stanford recommended recalibrating the regenerative braking sensitivity, Ken read aloud from one particularly thick analysis. Dr. Williams from MIT suggested upgrading the adaptive suspension processors. Dr. Chen from Carnegie Mellon proposed installing additional sensors to improve system communication. All brilliant solutions to problems that weren't actually causing the failures. Diana said, with the bitter wisdom of someone who'd watched expert after expert miss the fundamental issue. Each consultant optimized their area of specialty while ignoring how those optimizations affected other systems. Mia had commandeered a tablet to pull up the vehicle's real-time diagnostic data, her young fingers navigating the complex interface with surprising fluency. The screens displayed dozens of parameters flowing in constant flux: battery charge rates, suspension dampening coefficients, brake force distribution, energy recovery efficiency, and stability control interventions. "Look at this pattern," Mia said, pointing to a series of data spikes that occurred whenever multiple systems activated simultaneously. Every time the car tries to do more than one thing at once, these interference peaks show up. It's like each system is shouting louder to be heard over the others, instead of learning to speak at different frequencies. Ken studied the data patterns his daughter had identified, recognizing the signature of harmonic interference that Sarah had spent years researching in her theoretical work. The hybrid supercar's multiple control systems were creating exactly the kind of feedback loops that his late wife had predicted would plague advanced automotive designs unless engineers learned to think holistically about system integration. "The solution isn't technical," Ken said slowly, his understanding crystallizing as he absorbed the implications of what Mia had discovered. It's philosophical. These systems need to be taught cooperation instead of competition. Explain, Diana demanded, her tone carrying the urgency of someone whose professional survival depended on understanding concepts that 30 previous consultants had missed entirely. Ken pulled out his own notebook, sketching a simple diagram that showed the hybrid supercar's various systems as interconnected circles rather than separate boxes. Right now, each system operates according to its own optimization criteria. The regenerative braking maximizes energy recovery. The adaptive suspension minimizes passenger discomfort. The stability control prioritizes traction and handling. That sounds reasonable, Jonathan Pike observed, from his position near the garage entrance, where he'd been monitoring their conversation while maintaining constant communication with Beaumont Industries security personnel. It would be reasonable if they were separate vehicles, Mia interjected, with the clarity that often made adults reconsider their assumptions. But they're all sharing the same wheels, the same chassis, the same driver inputs. When they optimize for different goals, using the same physical components, they create conflicts that make everything worse. Diana leaned over Ken's diagram, her engineering background allowing her to follow the logic that had apparently escaped her previous consultants. So instead of optimizing individual systems, we need to optimize the relationships between systems. Exactly, Ken confirmed. But that requires rewriting the fundamental control algorithms to prioritize harmony over individual performance. Instead of each system trying to be perfect at its own job, they all need to be good enough at their jobs while helping the others succeed at theirs. The concept was simple to explain but revolutionary in its implications. Traditional automotive engineering approached complex vehicles by dividing them into manageable subsystems, each optimized independently before integration. Ken was proposing the opposite, designing systems from the beginning to work together, accepting individual compromises in pursuit of collective excellence. How long would it take to implement this approach? Diana asked, glancing at her watch with obvious anxiety about the approaching board meeting deadline. That depends on how much modification your current software architecture can handle, Ken replied, moving to one of the garage's computer workstations. If the existing control modules can accept new coordination protocols, we might be able to implement a pilot version in a few hours. If they require complete reprogramming, then we're looking at months of development time that we don't have. Diana finished grimly. The board isn't going to approve continued funding based on theoretical solutions that can't be demonstrated today. Ken began examining the hybrid supercar's software architecture, his fingers moving across multiple keyboards as he accessed diagnostic interfaces that most mechanics never saw. The vehicle's computer systems were indeed sophisticated, with processing power that rivaled some industrial applications. But they'd been programmed according to traditional hierarchical models that treated each subsystem as an independent entity. The good news is that your hardware platform can definitely handle coordination protocols, Ken announced after 20 minutes of deep analysis. The processors have enough spare capacity to run mediation algorithms that could resolve conflicts between competing systems. And the bad news? Diana asked, though her expression suggested she already anticipated the answer. The bad news is that implementing those protocols requires understanding your proprietary software at a level that goes beyond normal diagnostic access, Ken admitted. I'd need administrative privileges to modify core control algorithms, and that means trusting me with trade secrets worth millions of dollars. The garage fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Diana was being asked to give a small-town mechanic access to technology that represented years of research and development, gambling her company's intellectual property on the insights of someone whose credentials came from practical experience rather than academic achievement. "Ms. Bowmont," Jonathan Pike said carefully, "I have to advise against providing that level of system access to unauthorized personnel. The security implications alone." "What security implications?" Mia asked, with a directness that cut through adult euphemisms like a laser through tissue paper. "Are you worried that Dad's going to steal your broken car designs? Because right now they don't work anyway, so what exactly would he be stealing?" Her logic was devastating in its simplicity, highlighting the absurdity of protecting intellectual property that had failed to produce functional results. Diana looked from Jonathan's corporate caution to Mia's uncompromising reason, weighing institutional protocols against desperate necessity. "How do I know you won't take our proprietary algorithms and sell them to competitors?" Diana asked Ken directly, her question carrying more curiosity than accusation. "Because I'm not interested in your algorithms," Ken replied honestly. "I'm interested in proving that my wife's theories about system harmony were correct. Sarah spent her career believing that the future of automotive engineering lay in cooperation rather than competition. And this car represents the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that principle." The mention of his late wife brought a different quality to Ken's voice, a depth of motivation that transcended financial incentives or professional recognition. Diana seemed to recognize the shift, understanding that she was dealing with someone whose commitment went beyond mere technical consultation. "Give him the access codes," Diana decided, overruling Jonathan's obvious objections. "Mr. Garrett, you have 4 hours to prove that cooperation works better than competition. If you succeed, you've revolutionized automotive engineering. If you fail, you've destroyed a $50 million project and probably ended my career." "No pressure at all," Ken said with a slight smile, his hands already reaching for the interface that would give him unprecedented control over one of the most advanced vehicles ever built. As he began the delicate process of rewriting control algorithms that had taken teams of specialists months to develop, Ken felt Sarah's presence guiding his understanding toward solutions that honored the natural harmony between mechanical systems. The next few hours would determine whether practical wisdom could triumph over institutional expertise, whether a widowed mechanic could succeed where armies of consultants had failed, and whether the principles of cooperation could finally prove their superiority over the philosophy of competitive optimization. The real test was about to begin, and everything Ken believed about engineering, family, and the power of working together was about to be put to the ultimate proof. Ken's fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision as he dove into the hybrid supercar's core programming. Lines of code flowed across multiple monitors, like digital DNA waiting to be rewritten. The software architecture was more complex than anything he'd encountered during his corporate years, with thousands of parameters controlling everything from microsecond brake pressure adjustments to predictive energy management algorithms. "This is incredible work," Ken murmured, his respect for the original programmers evident despite their fundamental philosophical error. "Each individual module is practically perfect. The regenerative braking code could be used in textbooks, and the adaptive suspension algorithms are works of art." Then why doesn't the car work? Diana asked, positioning herself where she could observe Ken's modifications while staying out of his way. Her tone carried the frustrated confusion of someone who'd paid for excellence, but received dysfunction. Because perfection in isolation becomes chaos in combination, Mia explained, looking up from the tablet where she'd been tracking system interactions in real time. It's like having 30 brilliant musicians who are each playing perfect music, but they're all playing different songs at the same time. Ken began implementing the first phase of his coordination protocol, a software layer designed to sit between the existing control modules and mediate their competing demands. The concept was theoretically simple but practically revolutionary. Instead of each system optimizing its own performance, they would negotiate shared solutions that served the vehicle's overall objectives. "I'm creating what Sarah called a harmony engine," Ken explained, as his modifications took shape on screen. "When the regenerative braking wants to maximize energy recovery and the stability control wants to maintain traction, instead of fighting each other, they'll negotiate a solution that achieves both goals partially rather than neither goal completely." The programming required not just technical skill, but an intuitive understanding of how mechanical systems could learn to cooperate. Ken found himself drawing on conversations with Sarah about biomimetic engineering, applying principles from natural systems where individual components sacrificed optimal performance for collective success. "Look at this," Mia said, pointing to a section of diagnostic data that showed unusual patterns. "There's something else running in the background, something that's not in any of the documentation." Ken paused his programming to examine the data streams Mia had identified, his expression growing troubled as he recognized signatures that didn't match the vehicle's official specifications. Hidden beneath the legitimate control systems was additional code that seemed designed to monitor and record everything the car did, possibly even transmitting that data to external receivers. "Diana, did you authorize any remote monitoring systems for this vehicle?" Ken asked, his voice carrying an edge of concern that made everyone in the garage focus on his words. "Absolutely not," Diana replied immediately. "This car contains proprietary technology that we've kept completely isolated from any external networks." "Why?" "Because someone has installed surveillance software that's been collecting detailed performance data on every test drive," Ken said, his analysis revealing the scope of what appeared to be industrial espionage. "Whoever did this has been watching every failure, every consultant recommendation, every modification attempt." Jonathan Pike moved quickly to Ken's workstation, his security training fully engaged as the implications became clear. "Can you trace where the data is being transmitted?" "Already working on it," Ken replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he followed digital breadcrumbs through layers of encrypted communication protocols. "The transmission signature suggests this has been going on for months, possibly since the first prototype tests." Diana's face went pale as she realized that someone had been stealing her company's research in real time, watching their struggles and probably profiting from their failures. This explains why every consultant seemed to miss the same fundamental issues. They weren't just failing independently, they were being guided toward failure. "Who benefits from your project failing?" Mia asked with the direct logic that cut through adult complications like a blade through silk. "Every automotive company that's invested billions in traditional hybrid technologies," Diana said grimly. If our approach succeeds, it makes their development programs obsolete. If it fails publicly, it discredits the entire concept of advanced system integration. Ken's analysis had revealed the surveillance system's command structure. Tracing its communications to a server that belonged to a consulting firm he recognized from the automotive industry's inner circles. Dr. Richard Lane's Advanced Automotive Solutions had been providing independent analysis to major manufacturers for years, their expertise apparently extending to industrial sabotage. Dr. Lane, Ken said, the name carrying a personal recognition that made his voice tight with anger. He was the consultant who testified against me during the corporate scandal that destroyed my career, claimed my hybrid designs were fundamentally flawed and potentially dangerous. You know this person? Diana asked, her tone sharpening as new possibilities occurred to her. He destroyed my reputation to protect traditional automotive approaches that were making his clients billions, Ken replied. Memories of professional betrayal flooded back with unexpected intensity. Sarah and I were developing cooperative system designs that threatened established industry practices. Lane made sure those designs never saw production. The surveillance discovery had transformed their technical challenge into something more personal and dangerous. Dr. Lane wasn't just monitoring Diana's project, he was actively working to ensure its failure, protecting established industry interests that viewed innovation as a threat to existing profit structures. We need to notify law enforcement, Jonathan Pike said, his security protocols finally aligning with actual security threats. This is industrial espionage on a massive scale. After we fix the car, Ken said firmly, his hands already returning to the keyboard. Right now, Lane thinks he succeeded in discrediting advanced system integration. The best way to stop him is to prove that cooperation works better than sabotage. Ken resumed his programming with renewed intensity, his modifications now serving dual purposes, proving Sarah's theories correct and demonstrating that ethical innovation could triumph over corporate manipulation. The Harmony engine he was creating would not only solve the hybrid supercar's technical problems, but vindicate years of research that had been suppressed by institutional interests. 2 hours until the board meeting? Diana announced, her voice tight, with the pressure of multiple crises converging simultaneously. Can you implement your coordination protocols in time? The basic framework is almost complete, Ken replied, his concentration absolute as critical code sections fell into place. But we'll need to test the modifications under actual driving conditions to verify that the systems can learn to cooperate effectively. Mia had been quietly monitoring the surveillance system's activities, her notebook filling with observations about its data collection patterns. Dad, the spy software is still active. It's recording everything we're doing right now, including your modifications. Good, Ken said with grim satisfaction. Let him watch us succeed where his sabotage was supposed to ensure failure. When this car performs the way it was designed to perform, every automotive executive will understand that cooperation produces better results than competition. As Ken approached the final stages of his programming, he felt Sarah's theoretical insights transforming into practical solutions that could revolutionize how complex vehicles were designed and controlled. The hybrid supercar represented more than advanced transportation. It was proof that innovation could overcome institutional resistance, that ethical engineering could triumph over corporate manipulation, and that sometimes the most profound breakthroughs came from understanding how systems could work together rather than against each other. Moments later, the Harmony engine was almost ready for testing, and Kenneth Garrett was about to discover whether his wife's dreams could finally overcome the forces that had destroyed his career and threatened his daughter's future. Success would mean vindication, financial security, and proof that cooperation was superior to competition. Failure would mean public humiliation, continued poverty, and confirmation that institutional power could crush individual innovation, regardless of its merit. The next hour would, determine everything. The Harmony engine's installation reached its critical phase as Ken prepared to upload the coordination protocols that would transform the hybrid supercar from a collection of competing systems into a unified organism. His modifications represented 3 hours of intensive programming, distilling Sarah's theoretical insights into executable code that could revolutionize automotive engineering if it worked, or destroy Diana's company if it failed. "Upload sequence initiated," Ken announced, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was attempting. Lines of code flowed into the vehicle's control modules, like digital blood entering a mechanical circulatory system carrying instructions that would teach formerly antagonistic systems to cooperate rather than compete. Mia watched the diagnostic displays as the new software propagated through the hybrid supercars network. Her notebook documented how individual system parameters began shifting toward shared optimization targets. "The regenerative braking is starting to communicate with the suspension control," she observed with growing excitement. "Instead of fighting over wheel management, they're negotiating response protocols." Diana positioned herself at a secondary workstation where she could monitor the installation progress while maintaining communication with Bowmont Industries headquarters. The board meeting was 90 minutes away, and her career depended on demonstrating that $50 million in development costs had produced something more valuable than an expensive failure. "Mr. Garrett?" Jonathan Pike interrupted from his position near the garage entrance, his voice carrying unusual urgency. "We have a problem. There's a vehicle approaching the estate that doesn't match any of our scheduled appointments." Ken looked up from his programming to see a black SUV navigating the winding access road with the purposeful speed of someone who knew exactly where they were going. The vehicle's corporate license plates and tinted windows suggested official business. But Jonathan's security protocols had apparently not authorized the visit. "Dr. Richard Lane," Diana said grimly, recognizing the SUV from previous encounters. "He's arrived to witness what he expects will be the final failure of our advanced integration project." Ken felt his stomach tighten as the reality of confronting his professional nemesis added personal stakes to an already critical situation. Lane had destroyed his career 3 years ago, claiming that cooperative system designs were fundamentally unsafe and economically impractical. Now Ken was about to test those exact principles under the scrutiny of the man who'd spent years discrediting them. "Let him come," Ken said, his hands returning to the keyboard with renewed determination. "Sarah's Harmony engine is almost fully loaded, and I want Lane to see what cooperative engineering can accomplish when it's not being sabotaged by institutional interests." The SUV parked near the garage entrance, disgorging Dr. Lane and 2 assistants, whose expensive suits and confident demeanor marked them as representatives of corporate automotive consulting. Lane himself appeared exactly as Ken remembered. Tall, immaculately groomed, and radiating the kind of intellectual arrogance that treated practical experience as inferior to theoretical credentials. "Miss Bowmont," Lane called as he approached the garage, his voice carrying the smooth authority of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. "I understand you're making a final attempt to salvage your integration project. I've come to observe the proceedings and provide expert analysis for the board meeting." "Expert analysis," Mia repeated, with the kind of innocent incredulity that made adults reconsider their assumptions. "Is that what you call watching someone else's work so you can explain why it won't succeed?" Lane's attention shifted to Mia with the condescending interest that adults often showed precocious children. "And you are someone who understands mechanical harmony better than people who've spent years explaining why it's impossible?" Mia replied, her young voice carrying absolute confidence in principles that Lane had built his career discrediting. Ken watched this exchange while his final code modifications uploaded to the hybrid supercar's control systems, the Harmony engine preparing to demonstrate whether cooperation could indeed triumph over competition in complex mechanical applications. The confrontation he'd avoided for 3 years was about to unfold in the most dramatic possible context. "Kenneth Garrett," Lane said, finally acknowledging Ken's presence with the kind of professional dismissal that reduced people to their perceived failures. "I'm surprised to find you involved in another doomed hybrid project. Haven't you learned that your theoretical approaches have no practical application in real-world automotive engineering?" "I've learned that institutional resistance to innovation often masquerades as technical expertise," Ken replied calmly, his programming complete and his confidence anchored in 3 hours of systematic problem-solving. "But today, we're going to test whether cooperation produces better results than sabotage." Lane's expression flickered with something that might have been concern, though he quickly covered it with professional skepticism. "Sabotage is a serious accusation, Mr. Garrett. I hope you have evidence to support such claims." "We have your surveillance software," Diana interjected, her tone carrying the cold fury of someone who'd realized the full extent of how she'd been manipulated. "Industrial espionage disguised as competitive analysis, designed to ensure this project failed regardless of its technical merit." The accusation hung in the air like an explosive device with an uncertain timer, its implications threatening to destroy reputations and careers that had been built on institutional deception. Lane's assistants exchanged nervous glances while their employer calculated responses to charges that could result in criminal prosecution. "I have no knowledge of any surveillance activities," Lane said carefully, his legal training evident in the precise phrasing that avoided outright denial while providing plausible deniability. "My consulting firm provides legitimate analysis based on publicly available information and industry-standard evaluation protocols." "Then you won't mind if we demonstrate the results of 3 hours of unmonitored engineering work," Ken said, moving toward the hybrid supercar with the confident stride of someone whose professional reputation was about to be either vindicated or destroyed forever. The vehicle systems had fully integrated his Harmony engine, their individual optimization protocols now subordinated to collective performance objectives that prioritized overall functionality over subsystem perfection. Diagnostic displays showed unprecedented coordination between formerly antagonistic components, with regenerative braking and adaptive suspension working together rather than fighting for control. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ken announced, settling into the driver's seat while Mia claimed her position at the diagnostic station. "Prepare to witness What happens when automotive systems are designed for cooperation instead of competition? The hybrid supercar's startup sequence revealed immediate differences from its previous behavior. Instead of the uncertain hesitation that had characterized earlier tests, the vehicle displayed smooth confidence as its various systems initialized in perfect synchronization. Battery management, regenerative braking, adaptive suspension, and stability control activated as a unified network rather than competing individuals. Impossible, Lane breathed, his professional skepticism challenged by diagnostic readings that exceeded every previous performance metric. The system conflicts should prevent this level of integration. System conflicts disappear when systems stop conflicting, Mia observed with the clarity that cut through years of institutional assumptions. Dad didn't eliminate the individual systems. He taught them to work together for shared goals instead of competing for individual optimization. As Ken guided the hybrid supercar through its first test sequence under the Harmony engine's control, everyone in the garage watched diagnostic displays that told a story of mechanical cooperation unprecedented in automotive engineering. The vehicle that had frustrated 30 consultants was finally performing as its designers had originally envisioned, proving that innovation could triumph over institutional resistance when given the opportunity to succeed. But the real test was still ahead. Whether the Harmony engine could maintain its coordination under the stress conditions that had defeated every previous attempt, and whether Kenneth Garrett could finally prove that his wife's theories deserved vindication rather than suppression. The moment of truth was approaching fast. The hybrid supercar glided through the Bowman Estate's test course with a fluid grace that defied 3 years of documented failures. Its Harmony engine orchestrating perfect cooperation between systems that had previously fought each other for control. Ken felt the difference in every aspect of the vehicle's behavior: acceleration that built smoothly without the jarring transitions that had plagued earlier tests, braking that captured energy while maintaining stability, suspension that adapted to terrain changes without compromising other systems' performance. Energy recovery efficiency is up 43%, Mia reported from the diagnostic station, her voice bright with vindication of principles she'd helped her father understand. But passenger comfort metrics are actually better than when the suspension was optimized independently. The systems aren't just cooperating, they're making each other more effective. Dr. Lane stood frozen at the garage entrance, his professional certainty crumbling as diagnostic displays showed performance levels that contradicted everything he'd spent years claiming was impossible. His assistants flanked him with tablets and recording equipment, documenting evidence that could destroy their employer's reputation if Ken's modifications proved sustainable under stress conditions. "This is a temporary anomaly," Lane declared, his voice carrying the desperate authority of someone whose worldview was being systematically dismantled. Complex systems integration always shows initial promise before revealing fundamental instabilities. Real-world conditions will expose the flaws in your theoretical approach. "Then let's test real-world conditions," Diana said, her confidence building as she watched months of expensive frustration transform into elegant success. She activated the estate's advanced driving course, deploying obstacles and challenge scenarios that would push the hybrid supercar beyond any reasonable operational parameters. Ken accepted the challenge without hesitation, understanding that half measures would leave room for Lane's institutional skepticism to discredit their breakthrough. The Harmony engine had to prove itself under conditions that would have destroyed the vehicle's previous configurations, demonstrating that cooperation wasn't just theoretically superior, but practically invincible. The test course materialized around them like a mechanical nightmare designed to find every weakness in automotive design. Sudden elevation changes that would normally trigger stability control conflicts, emergency braking scenarios that would pit regenerative energy recovery against traction management, high-speed cornering sequences that would force adaptive suspension to choose between comfort and performance. Hold on, Ken warned as they approached the first major challenge, a series of sharp curves designed to induce the system conflicts that had defeated every previous test. The hybrid supercar entered the sequence with a confidence that felt almost supernatural, its various control systems negotiating shared responses that optimized collective performance rather than individual metrics. Through the curves, Ken felt the Harmony engine working in real time, mediating between regenerative braking's desire to capture kinetic energy and stability, control's need to maintain traction. Instead of the violent competition that had characterized earlier tests, the systems found elegant compromises that achieved both objectives partially rather than neither completely. "Incredible," Diana breathed, monitoring performance data that exceeded her most optimistic projections. The vehicle isn't just handling the test course, it's learning from each challenge and adapting its coordination protocols in real time. Lane's face had gone pale as the implications of what he was witnessing began to register. His career had been built on discrediting exactly this type of cooperative engineering, convincing automotive executives that system integration beyond certain limits was inherently unstable and economically impractical. Ken's success threatened not just Lane's professional reputation, but the entire consulting industry that profited from keeping innovation within traditional boundaries. "Emergency braking test," Diana announced, activating a scenario that had consistently produced the most dramatic failures in previous attempts. Sudden deceleration from highway speeds while maintaining vehicle control and maximizing energy recovery. The exact situation where competing optimization algorithms had previously created catastrophic conflicts. Ken hit the brakes with complete confidence in the Harmony engine's ability to coordinate responses that served the vehicle's overall objectives rather than individual system preferences. The hybrid supercar's deceleration was smooth and controlled, its regenerative braking capturing enormous amounts of energy, while stability control maintained perfect traction and adaptive suspension kept passengers comfortable. 87% energy recovery efficiency, Mia reported with undisguised triumph. Previous tests never exceeded 42% because the systems were fighting each other. Dad's Harmony engine let them work together to achieve what none of them could accomplish alone. The diagnostic data was undeniable, showing performance metrics that vindicated every principle Sarah had theorized about cooperative system design. Ken felt his late wife's presence almost physically, as if she were sitting beside him, witnessing the proof that their shared vision had been correct all along. "This changes everything," Diana said, her voice carrying the awe of someone who understood the broader implications of what they'd accomplished. "If these principles can be applied to other vehicle classes, to mass production, to entire transportation systems—" "They can't be," Lane interrupted, his voice laced with the desperate intensity of someone whose professional survival depended on discrediting evidence that contradicted his fundamental beliefs. "Cooperative optimization is inherently unstable in complex systems. What you're seeing is a temporary alignment that will collapse under extended operational stress. Then let's test extended operational stress, Ken said, his confidence absolute, as he prepared to subject the hybrid supercar to conditions that would reveal any weaknesses in the Harmony engine's coordination protocols. The final test sequence pushed every system beyond its individual design limits, demanding performance that could only be achieved through perfect cooperation between components that had never been designed to work together so intimately. Sustained high-speed operation with continuous regenerative braking, adaptive suspension responding to constantly changing terrain, stability control managing extreme cornering forces, all simultaneously, all in perfect coordination. "System integration holding steady," Mia reported, her notebook filling with observations that documented the most successful automotive engineering test in recent history. Energy efficiency, passenger comfort, vehicle control, everything is performing better than the original specifications promised. Lane watched the diagnostic displays with the expression of someone whose entire professional foundation was crumbling beneath him. His surveillance software had monitored months of failures. His analysis had predicted inevitable breakdown. His reputation had been staked on the impossibility of what Ken was demonstrating with elegant simplicity. 45 minutes until the board meeting, Diana announced, her tone carrying cautious optimism, tempered by the awareness that success brought its own complications. "Jonathan, prepare a comprehensive report documenting everything we've accomplished here. I want every board member to understand exactly what Mr. Garrett has achieved." As the hybrid supercar completed its final test sequence and returned to the garage facility, Ken realized that their technical success was only the beginning of a larger battle. Lane represented institutional forces that profited from maintaining traditional approaches to automotive engineering, and those forces wouldn't surrender their influence without a fight. The Harmony engine had proven that cooperation was superior to competition in complex mechanical systems. But now Ken would have to prove that ethical innovation could triumph over corporate manipulation in the even more complex system of institutional power and economic influence. The real test was just a begin, and the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. The silence following the hybrid supercar's triumphant return stretched across the garage like the calm before an approaching storm. Ken shut down the vehicle's systems, watching diagnostic displays confirm that every parameter remained stable even after the most demanding test sequence in the project's history. The Harmony engine had not only succeeded, it had exceeded every performance metric by margins that would redefine automotive engineering standards. Dr. Lane stood motionless near the garage entrance, his assistants documenting evidence that contradicted years of consulting reports their firm had produced for major manufacturers. The implications were staggering. If cooperative system design was indeed superior to traditional approaches, Lane's entire professional edifice had been built on suppressing innovation that could have transformed the industry decades earlier. "Mr. Garrett," Lane said finally, his voice carrying a different quality than the arrogant dismissal he'd displayed earlier, "I believe we need to discuss the broader implications of what you've accomplished here." "The only thing we need to discuss," Diana interjected with controlled fury, "is your systematic sabotage of my company's research through industrial espionage. Those surveillance systems didn't install themselves." Ken climbed out of the hybrid supercar, his satisfaction at proving Sarah's theories tempered by the awareness that Lane's defeat would likely trigger retaliation from the institutional forces he represented. Consulting firms like Advanced Automotive Solutions had billions of dollars in contracts dependent on maintaining traditional engineering approaches that Ken's success had just rendered obsolete. Industrial espionage is a serious accusation that requires serious evidence, Lane replied, his legal training evident in the careful phrasing designed to avoid admissions while preserving options. My firm provides legitimate competitive analysis based on publicly available information. Publicly available information, Mia repeated with the kind of innocent skepticism that made adults reconsider their rationalizations. Is that what you call secretly recording private test data and transmitting it to your clients without permission? Lane's assistants exchanged uncomfortable glances as Mia's directness cut through their employer's carefully constructed denials. Jonathan Pike had been quietly documenting the surveillance evidence, building a digital trail that could support criminal charges if Diana decided to pursue legal action. Miss Bowmont, Lane continued, ignoring Mia's challenge while focusing on damage control, I think you'll find that pursuing espionage allegations would be counterproductive for all parties involved. My clients represent major automotive manufacturers who could become valuable partners in commercializing your integration technology. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Cooperate with existing industry power structures or face coordinated resistance that could prevent Ken's innovations from ever reaching mass production. Diana understood the dynamics better than anyone, having witnessed how institutional forces could strangle promising technologies through patent challenges, regulatory obstacles, and market manipulation. Are you suggesting that my success depends on your approval? Ken asked, with the calm authority of someone whose professional vindication had eliminated fear of institutional retaliation. Because Sarah and I learned years ago that innovation doesn't require permission from people who profit from preventing progress. Lane's expression hardened as he realized that financial incentives and professional threats wouldn't be sufficient to control someone whose motivation transcended mere career advancement. Ken represented the most dangerous type of innovator. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The automotive industry is more complex than you understand, Mr. Garrett, Lane said, his tone shifting toward open intimidation. Successful commercialization requires regulatory approval, manufacturing partnerships, distribution networks, and financial backing that individual inventors simply cannot obtain without institutional support. Maybe individual inventors shouldn't have to, Mia observed with the clarity that adults often lost in pursuing complex solutions to simple problems. Maybe the institution should adapt to support innovation instead of trying to control it. Her words highlighted the fundamental conflict between Ken's cooperative engineering principles and the competitive business structures that dominated automotive manufacturing. The Harmony engine had proven that mechanical systems performed better when designed for collaboration, but human institutions remained organized around competition and control. 30 minutes until the board meeting, Diana announced. Her attention split between celebrating technical success and managing the corporate complications that success had created. Mr. Garrett, I need to know whether you're prepared to defend your modifications against the kind of institutional resistance that Dr. Lane represents. Ken looked at his daughter, whose notebook contained documentation of the most significant automotive engineering breakthrough in decades. Then, at Diana, whose company had risked everything to prove that innovation could triumph over conventional wisdom. Finally, he looked at Lane, whose presence represented all the forces that had destroyed his career and suppressed Sarah's research. "I've spent 3 years wondering whether Sarah's theories were brilliant insights or wishful thinking," Ken said, his voice carrying the weight of personal vindication and professional resurrection. "Today proved they were both. Brilliant insights that seemed like wishful thinking, only because people like Dr. Lane spent years convincing everyone they were impossible." The garage's tension crystallized around the fundamental question that Ken's success had raised: whether individual innovation could overcome institutional resistance, or whether technical breakthroughs would remain subordinate to existing power structures regardless of their merit. "Diana," Jonathan Pike interrupted from his security station. "We're receiving multiple calls from board members who want to observe the vehicle demonstration personally. Apparently, word about our success has reached Beaumont Industries headquarters." "How did information about a private test reach the board?" Diana asked, her suspicion immediately focusing on the most obvious source of unauthorized communication. Lane's slight smile confirmed what everyone already suspected. His surveillance network extended beyond simple data collection to real-time reporting, keeping his clients informed about competitive developments. The board members calling weren't responding to Diana's scheduled presentation. They were reacting to intelligence that had been provided by corporate spies. "Let them come," Ken said, his confidence absolute, despite the obvious manipulation involved. "The EI Harmony engine will perform just as well for an audience of automotive executives as it did for Dr. Lane's recording equipment." "This isn't a game, Mr. Garrett," Lane warned, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern about forces he'd set in motion. "When major manufacturers feel threatened by disruptive technology, they have resources and influence that can destroy careers, companies, and entire research programs. Then they should have developed better technology instead of spending their resources suppressing other people's innovations," Mia replied with the uncompromising logic that reduced complex political maneuvering to simple moral choices. As luxury sedans began arriving at the Bowman Estate, carrying board members whose premature appearance confirmed the extent of Lane's surveillance network, Ken realized that their technical success had triggered consequences that extended far beyond proving Sarah's theories correct. The Harmony engine represented a fundamental challenge to automotive industry orthodoxy, threatening established profit models and consulting relationships worth billions of dollars. "Mr. Garrett," Diana said quietly, as they prepared to face scrutiny from some of the most powerful figures in automotive manufacturing, "are you ready to defend cooperative engineering principles against people whose careers depend on discrediting them?" Ken looked at the hybrid supercar, its systems humming with the elegant coordination that had seemed impossible just hours earlier, then at his daughter, whose insights had made the breakthrough possible. Sarah's vision had finally found vindication through their combined efforts, proving that innovation could indeed triumph over institutional resistance when guided by understanding rather than ego. "I've been ready for 3 years," Ken replied. His, Diana Bowmont voice carrying the quiet determination of someone whose professional resurrection was about to face its ultimate test. "The question is whether the automotive industry is ready for the truth about cooperative engineering." The real battle was about to begin. And everything Ken believed about innovation, integrity, and the power of working together was about to confront forces that viewed those principles as existential threats to their continued dominance. The board members who emerged from their luxury vehicles carried themselves with the calculated authority of people accustomed to controlling billion-dollar decisions. Their expensive suits and practiced expressions marked them as representatives of automotive industry power. Ken recognized several faces from trade publications, executives whose companies had shaped transportation policy for decades, while consistently suppressing innovations that threatened established profit models. "Ms. Bowmont," called Harrison Webb, chairman of Beaumont Industries Board, and a man whose automotive career had spanned 4 decades of incremental changes designed to maximize shareholder returns while minimizing technological disruption. "We understand you've made claims about breakthrough performance that require immediate verification." Diana stepped forward with the composed professionalism that had served her through years of corporate politics. But Ken could see the tension in her shoulders as she realized the demonstration's stakes had escalated beyond simple technical validation to include her company's very survival. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming," Diana replied smoothly. "Mr. Garrett has indeed achieved remarkable integration success with our hybrid prototype. The performance metrics exceed our most optimistic projections." "Performance metrics can be manipulated," interrupted Margaret Sterling, whose consulting firm had provided competitive analysis to major manufacturers for 20 years. Her presence confirmed that Lane's network extended throughout the industry's power structure, coordinating resistance to innovations that threatened established business models. Mia looked up from her diagnostic station where she'd been preparing comprehensive documentation of the Harmony engine's success. "How do you manipulate physics?" she asked with the directness that made adults reconsider their assumptions. "The energy recovery efficiency is either 43% higher than previous tests or it isn't. Math doesn't lie, just because you don't like the answers." Sterling's expression flickered with something that might have been respect for Mia's logic, but her professional obligations to clients who profited from traditional engineering approaches prevented any acknowledgement of the breakthrough's legitimacy. "Young lady," Sterling said with condescending patience, "engineering involves complexities that extend beyond simple mathematics. Real-world applications require consideration of manufacturing costs, regulatory compliance, market acceptance, and long-term reliability factors that laboratory demonstrations cannot address." "Then let's address them," Ken said, moving toward the hybrid supercar with confidence born from hours of successful testing. "Every concern you've raised can be evaluated through direct observation of how cooperative systems perform under actual operating conditions." The board members arranged themselves around the garage facility with the careful positioning of people preparing to witness either vindication or disaster. Their body language suggested skepticism carefully calibrated to protect reputations regardless of what they observed, ready to dismiss success as a temporary anomaly or celebrate failure as confirmation of institutional wisdom. "Dr. Lane has briefed us on the theoretical limitations of integration approaches," Webb announced, his tone carrying the weight of predetermined conclusions. "Complex systems optimization inevitably produces instabilities that render cooperative designs impractical for mass production." "Dr. Lane has been wrong about cooperative engineering for years," Ken replied calmly, settling into the driver's seat, while Mia activated comprehensive diagnostic monitoring. "Today we're going to demonstrate what happens when systems are designed to work together instead of against each other." The hybrid supercar's startup sequence unfolded with the smooth confidence that had characterized every test since the Harmony engine's installation. Its various control modules initialized in perfect synchronization, while diagnostic displays showed unprecedented coordination between formerly competing components. "Impossible," breathed Thomas Crawford, whose engineering background allowed him to understand the technical significance of what the diagnostic data revealed. The regenerative braking and adaptive suspension are sharing optimization targets. That level of integration shouldn't be achievable with current processing architectures. It's achievable when you stop trying to make each system perfect individually and start helping them be excellent collectively, Mia explained, her notebook documenting performance metrics that validated every principle her father had programmed into the coordination protocols. Ken guided the hybrid supercar through demonstration sequences that showcased each aspect of the Harmony engine's capabilities. From energy recovery efficiency that exceeded theoretical maximums to passenger comfort levels that improved as system integration deepened, every metric contradicted the institutional wisdom that had guided automotive development for decades. "This changes everything," whispered Jennifer Hayes, whose venture capital firm had invested heavily in traditional hybrid technologies that Ken's breakthrough had just rendered obsolete. "If cooperative optimization is genuinely superior to competitive approaches, every existing development program needs fundamental reconsideration." The admission hung in the air like an explosive device with an uncertain timer, its implications threatening to reshape entire industries built on assumptions that Ken's success had systematically demolished. Sterling and Lane exchanged glances that communicated volumes about the coordinated response required to contain innovation that threatened their clients' continued dominance. "Temporary success proves nothing about long-term viability," Sterling declared with the desperate authority of someone whose professional survival depended on discrediting evidence that contradicted fundamental beliefs. "Complex systems integration always shows initial promise before revealing inherent instabilities that make mass production impractical. Then we'll test long-term viability," Diana said, her confidence building as she watched board members struggle to dismiss performance data that exceeded every previous benchmark. "Mr. Garrett, demonstrate extended operational stability under maximum stress conditions." Ken accepted the challenge without hesitation, understanding that partial demonstrations would leave room for institutional skepticism to discredit their breakthrough. The Harmony engine had to prove itself capable of sustained excellence under conditions that would destroy traditional automotive designs, showing that cooperation wasn't just theoretically superior, but practically invincible. The extended test sequence pushed every system beyond its individual design limits while maintaining perfect coordination between components that had never been intended to work so intimately together. Energy recovery, passenger comfort, vehicle control, system reliability, all performing better than original specifications while operating as a unified organism rather than competing individuals. "Integration stability holding at 100%, Mia reported, her voice bright with vindication of principles that institutional forces had spent years suppressing. "Energy efficiency, comfort metrics, control responsiveness. Everything is performing better than the sum of its individual capabilities." Crawford stared at diagnostic displays that contradicted decades of engineering education, his expression showing the cognitive dissonance that occurred when observable reality conflicted with institutional doctrine. "This shouldn't be possible according to everything we understand about complex systems optimization." "Maybe," Ken suggested as the hybrid supercar completed its demonstration and returned to the garage. What we understand about complex systems optimization has been limited by assumptions that serve institutional interests rather than engineering excellence. The silence that followed Ken's observation contained multitudes of implication about how automotive development had been constrained by profit models that benefited from incremental improvements rather than revolutionary breakthroughs. His success threatened not just individual careers, but entire business structures built on controlling innovation rather than enabling it. 15 minutes until the scheduled board meeting, Diana announced, her tone carrying cautious triumph tempered by the awareness that technical success was only the beginning of battles that would determine whether cooperative engineering principles could overcome institutional resistance. As board members prepared to render judgment on innovations that threatened their established worldview, Ken realized that proving Sarah's theories correct had been the easy part. The real challenge lay in demonstrating that ethical innovation could triumph over corporate manipulation, that individual insight could overcome institutional power, and that cooperation could indeed prove superior to competition even in systems designed around competitive advantage. The final test was about to begin, and everything Ken believed about engineering, integrity, and the power of working together would soon face judgment from forces that viewed those principles as existential threats to their continued control over automotive progress. The boardroom atmosphere in Diana's estate office crackled with tension as 15 of the automotive industry's most influential figures faced a decision that would determine whether revolutionary innovation could overcome institutional resistance. Ken sat beside Mia at the conference table's far end. Their documentation spread before them like evidence in a trial where the verdict would reshape transportation engineering forever. The performance data is undeniable, Harrison Webb admitted reluctantly, his decades of corporate experience struggling to reconcile observable success with the institutional orthodoxy that had guided his entire career. Mr. Garrett's integration approach has achieved metrics that our best consultants claimed were theoretically impossible. Margaret Sterling leaned forward with the calculated intensity of someone whose professional survival depended on discrediting evidence that threatened her client's continued dominance. Performance data from isolated testing conditions proves nothing about mass production viability. Real-world manufacturing requires standardization, quality control, and cost management that cooperative designs cannot accommodate. Why not? Mia asked, with a directness that cut through adult euphemisms like surgical steel through tissue. If the systems work better together than apart, wouldn't that make manufacturing easier instead of harder? Her question highlighted the fundamental flaw in Sterling's argument. The assertion that superior performance somehow created production obstacles rather than opportunities. The Harmony engine had proven that cooperative systems were more stable, more efficient, and more reliable than competitive approaches. Exactly the characteristics that manufacturing processes were designed to optimize. Young lady, Sterling began with condescending patience, but Ken interrupted before she could deploy the institutional dismissal that reduced innovative insights to naive simplicity. Dr. Sterling raises an important point about manufacturing considerations, Ken said diplomatically, producing a tablet that displayed production analysis he'd prepared during the board's arrival. Fortunately, cooperative systems actually simplify manufacturing because they require fewer individual optimizations and generate fewer quality control variables. The production data revealed another dimension of the Harmony engine's revolutionary implications. Not only did cooperative systems perform better than competitive approaches, they were easier and cheaper to manufacture. Every argument against innovation had been systematically demolished by 3 hours of methodical engineering work. Thomas Crawford studied Ken's manufacturing analysis with the focused attention of someone whose engineering background allowed him to understand implications that pure business executives might miss. This suggests that cooperative integration could reduce production costs while improving performance metrics. That combination would represent the most significant manufacturing breakthrough since assembly line automation. Which is exactly why it must be suppressed, Dr. Lane interjected with a brutal honesty that surprised everyone present. Gentlemen, ladies, if Mr. Garrett's approach reaches mass production, it will render obsolete billions of dollars in existing research, development programs, and manufacturing infrastructure that our companies have invested decades building. The admission hung in the room like poison gas, revealing the true nature of institutional resistance to innovation that threatened established profit models. Lane had acknowledged what everyone understood, but no one had stated directly. Technical superiority was irrelevant when measured against economic disruption that could destroy entire corporate empires. So, you're proposing that we suppress superior technology to protect inferior investments? Diana asked, her voice carrying a dangerous calm that preceded corporate explosions. That we prioritize shareholder returns over engineering excellence? I'm proposing that we consider the broader implications of disruptive innovation, Lane replied, with the smooth rationalization that transformed corporate greed into fiduciary responsibility. Sudden technological shifts create market instabilities that can destroy jobs, communities, and entire regional economies built around established manufacturing approaches. Mia looked up from her notebook where she'd been documenting the conversation with the methodical precision that had characterized all her observations. But keeping inferior technology doesn't preserve jobs. It just delays the day when someone else develops superior solutions that make the inferior technology completely worthless. Her logic was devastating in its simplicity, highlighting how short-term protection of established interests ultimately guaranteed long-term obsolescence. Innovation postponed was innovation surrendered to competitors who weren't constrained by existing investments in outdated approaches. The board must consider fiduciary obligations to shareholders who have invested in traditional development programs, Webb said carefully, his tone suggesting reluctant acknowledgement of Mia's reasoning while maintaining corporate responsibility to existing stakeholders. What about fiduciary obligations to future shareholders who will inherit the consequences of today's decisions? Ken asked quietly. Sarah used to say that the greatest corporate responsibility was ensuring that tomorrow's customers received better products than today's customers, not protecting today's profits from tomorrow's possibilities. The mention of his late wife brought a different quality to Ken's voice, connecting their technical breakthrough to larger questions about corporate responsibility and the role of innovation in improving human lives. Diana's hybrid supercar represented more than advanced transportation. It was proof that cooperation could triumph over competition in human institutions as well as mechanical systems. Mr. Garrett, Jennifer Hayes said slowly, her venture capital background providing perspective that pure automotive executives might lack. If we approve commercialization of your integration approach, what guarantees can you provide about intellectual property protection and competitive advantage maintenance? None, Ken replied with an honesty that seemed to startle the room. Cooperative engineering principles can't be protected like traditional patents because they're based on understanding natural harmony rather than proprietary components. Anyone who learns these principles can apply them to create better systems. The admission sent visible shock waves through board members whose careers had been built on controlling innovation through patent portfolios and licensing agreements. Ken was proposing to revolutionize automotive engineering while simultaneously making that revolution available to everyone, destroying the exclusive competitive advantages that had justified decades of research investment. Oh, that's commercial suicide, Sterling declared with genuine alarm. Without intellectual property protection, there's no mechanism for recovering development costs or maintaining market leadership. Unless, Mia suggested, with the clarity that made adults reconsider fundamental assumptions, you make money by building better products instead of preventing other people from building better products. Her observation exposed the philosophical divide that separated cooperative engineering from competitive business models. Ken's approach focused on creating value through superior performance, while traditional approaches focused on capturing value through artificial scarcity and controlled innovation. The board needs time to consider implications that extend beyond immediate technical performance, Webb announced, his tone carrying the weight of someone postponing decisions that could reshape entire industries. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning with legal counsel and competitive analysis from our strategic planning consultants. No, Diana said with quiet firmness that commanded attention despite its lack of volume. The decision gets made now, in this room, by people who have witnessed the evidence directly. Mr. Garrett has proven that cooperative engineering produces superior results. Either we commercialize that breakthrough, or we admit that this company prioritizes institutional comfort over technical excellence. The ultimatum crystallized months of frustration into a single moment that would determine whether Beaumont Industries led automotive innovation or followed competitors who were less constrained by existing investments and obsolete approaches. Ken watched the board members grapple with implications that transcended simple business decisions, their expressions revealing the cognitive dissonance that occurred when institutional orthodoxy confronted irrefutable evidence of its own limitations. Success had been easier to achieve than acceptance would be to secure. All in favor of immediate commercialization of Mr. Garrett's integration technology, Diana called, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was risking. The vote that followed was closer than Ken had hoped, but decisive enough to validate years of faith in principles that institutional forces had spent decades suppressing. 6 board members voted for commercialization, 4 opposed, and 5 abstained. Enough to authorize moving forward, but not enough to guarantee smooth implementation. Motion carries, Diana announced with quiet satisfaction. Mr. Garrett, congratulations on revolutionizing automotive engineering. Miss Garrett, thank you for insights that made this breakthrough possible. 6 months later, Ken stood in the executive offices of Garrett Bowmont Advanced Systems, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as the first production vehicles equipped with Harmony engines rolled off assembly lines that had been retooled to manufacture cooperation instead of competition. The company's success had exceeded every projection, with automotive manufacturers worldwide licensing cooperative integration technologies that Ken freely shared with anyone committed to engineering excellence over competitive advantage. Dad, the MIT acceptance letter arrived, Mia announced, entering his office with the envelope that represented validation of her academic potential. At 13, she had become the youngest consulting engineer in automotive history, her insights into mechanical harmony earning respect from professionals who had initially dismissed her contributions as precocious observations. Full scholarship with research assistantship in sustainable transportation systems, Ken read aloud, his pride in his daughter's achievements matched only by his satisfaction that financial barriers would never constrain her intellectual development. Your mother would be so proud. She knows, Mia replied with the quiet confidence that had characterized all her observations. Every time we solve a problem by helping systems work together instead of fighting each other, we're proving that her theories were right all along. Through their office windows, Forest Glen looked different than it had a year earlier. The abandoned coal mine had been converted into a research facility where cooperative engineering principles were being applied to everything from renewable energy systems to urban transportation networks. The town that had once symbolized industrial decline now represented the future of technological innovation, guided by cooperation rather than competition. Mr. Garrett, Diana's voice came through the intercom. The Department of Transportation is calling about the National Infrastructure Modernization Project. They want to discuss applying Harmony engine principles to traffic management systems. Ken smiled, remembering Sarah's belief that the best engineering solutions were conversations between different systems rather than competitions for dominance. Their hybrid supercar had been just the beginning. It was proof that cooperation could triumph over conflict in mechanical systems, human institutions, and the complex relationships between technology and society. The future stretched ahead like an open highway full of challenges that would require the kind of innovative thinking that emerged when brilliant minds worked together instead of against each other. Kenneth Garrett, once a defeated mechanic struggling to provide for his daughter, had become the architect of a revolution that proved the most profound solutions often came from the simplest insights. Everything worked better when designed to help rather than hinder, to cooperate rather than compete, to build harmony rather than perpetuate conflict. In Forest Glen, West Virginia, where abandoned mines had given way to research facilities and dying industries had been replaced by thriving innovation, the transformation was complete. A father and daughter had changed the world by refusing to accept that superior engineering was impossible, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements began with ordinary people who dared to see solutions where others saw only problems. The Harmony engine hummed quietly in vehicles around the globe, carrying millions of passengers toward destinations made possible by the radical idea that working together was better than working apart. Sarah's vision had finally found its voice, and the conversation between systems she had dreamed of was changing everything, one cooperative solution at a time.